I will say I have the complete honor to sit here and moderate this session. Something to share is that you have some very innovative thinkers here who are trying some really innovative approaches, but that's not to say that they're new in this game. I mean, you look at these panel and they have so many, a wealth of experience in the education field in various pieces of the education system, with so much success and so much leadership that's happened. And so today we're really going to highlight their most recent approaches and accomplishments. But again, I think there's so much we can learn with this group of folks and these group of leaders who have done so much in the education space for decades. So I am really, really thrilled to introduce, we have Orly Friedman, who is a founder of the Redbridge School. We have Kimi Kean, who is our CEO and co-founder of Families in Action. And we have Heather Kirkpatrick, who is the president and CEO of Alder Graduate School of Education. So thank you all for joining us. And I know the title is about being on the front lines, so you could imagine them just simply being here is a really big deal, because being on the front lines, I'm sure there's a big demand for you all at this moment at your own spaces. So thank you so much for being with us. One thing also to share is that this is a group who is really supporting and figuring out ways to be innovative in the education space for various sectors. And so I want to start off with just asking Orly to share a little bit about Redbridge, given that your focus is really on the student directly, and share just kind of how this came to be, what you're doing there, and what are you seeing to be the recent trends in your space?
Sure. So Redbridge is a demonstration school for a model of education focused on student agency. So we've taken the structures of school that typically reward and reinforce compliance, like the way that we group students and promote students, the way that we grade students, the layout of the classroom, the role of the teacher, and we redesign those to reward and reinforce student agency and a sense of ownership instead. Redbridge, as I mentioned, is a demonstration school. We opened 4 years ago. We opened September 1st, 2020, right in the middle of the pandemic. And we currently serve 40 students in the equivalent of kindergarten through 5th grade. I say the equivalent because one of the things we do differently is we group students by autonomy level instead of grade level, which we can get into, but that's just one example of how we're rethinking the structures of school. And you asked about the trends that we're seeing. One of the big trends that led to the creation of Redbridge was the increase in anxiety and depression in students across the country over the last 50 years. And we know that anxiety and depression often come from a feeling of a lack of control or self-efficacy. And schools are really not designed to give students much control or to build their self-efficacy. Also, at the same time, all of the technology that has shaped the way that we work and live over the last 50 years can either make us passive consumers, or we can use it to enhance our agency. And so founding Redbridge was really about dealing with both of those trends, empowering students so that they can be creators with all of the technology out there, but also empowering them to feel like they're leaders of their own lives and that they have control over their future and that they can set goals for themselves, make a plan, follow through, know when to ask for help, and that sort of thing. So that's what Redbridge is all about and how it's addressing some of those trends.
Wonderful. And what's great about this is we heard from the young people this morning and just talking about wanting student voice and having some feelings, having some thoughts, and wanting to take ownership. So it really sounds like that's really resonating with the work that you're doing. So, Kimi, I know we've talked about students, but let's talk about families. You've been in this work for a really long time. We've had our time in schools together, and it's really impressive that you continue to find ways to just approach education in a more broad and innovative way. And so, what you're doing here is tackling kind of the outreach to families and policy. Share a little more about how you're connecting the education students with families and policy.
Thanks, Yvette, and thanks, Orly. I want to just start by building on the theme of agency, Families in Action for Quality Education. We're based in Oakland, and there we're battling the crisis where 2 in 10 Black and brown students read at grade level. And this is 2024, folks. 1 in 10 do math at grade level. And so when we think about who needs agency in education, we think about our students, but we also think about our parents. And we ask the question, Black and brown parents are counted out every day in their lives. What if we counted them all in? And what if we counted them in as leaders in their own child's education, as leaders in our school, and as leaders in our city? So just love the theme of agency, and we really apply it to the families that we work with. And we really think that they are the force, this really untapped source of power to make education more just and more equitable. We've got to invest in family leadership. So that's what I've been up to for 5 years, and I just want to say I got really choked up listening to Jeffrey Canada. He was just my total inspiration when I became a principal about 20 years ago. And we read that book. It was our Bible, and it was like whatever it takes. We really, really believed in that. And so, Jeff, wherever you are, thank you. And I feel like in some small way, this is helping to carry forward that vision of the whole family as taking ownership for the education and building that agency.
Yeah, and as Kimi was looking up to Jeff, I was looking up to Kimi as a young principal. So, really seeing these leaders and being able to continue to follow that work. So, yeah, thanks to Kimi, I was able to be a better leader myself because of your leadership when we were in schools.
Thanks.
Let's move on to Heather, who's really focusing on teachers. And you and I were talking about this before, because some of the language of the narrative out there is about this teacher shortage and this high turnover rate in teachers and really struggling to find teachers just to meet the demand in schools. Share a little bit about what you're doing and what trends you're seeing in your space.
Sure. So I'm at Alder Graduate School of Education, and I founded that with an incredible team of people. And we are a graduate school of education, grant master's degrees and teacher credentials. The more innovative pieces of that, the reason I think I'm up here, is we're really shifting who gets access to becoming a teacher, and that has a lot to do, I think, I can speak more about this later on, but who gets access. And 80% of the teachers in the country and in California are white women like me. Of course, most of the children enrolled in our public K-12 school systems in California and in the country are not white. So this big effort, 85% of the students at Alder identify as people of color, 75% are first in their families to graduate from college, over half are Pell recipients. So we're really, one of the innovative things that we're doing is creating access. We noticed in this was not an intended outcome, but it's one that we're incredibly excited about. We've become a very powerful community-based workforce development pathway, and we've seen about 75% of our students come into us at the average age of 28. So we're attracting a very different sort of new teacher into the space and making it accessible to them. And at 28, about 3/4 of our class are earning $30K or less. A lot of them are aides in the classroom, long-term subs, these kinds of roles. And we noticed that in 1 year after they've earned their master's and credential with us, they're doubling that salary because the starting teacher salary in California is $60. So this very powerful work about granting access, creating huge economic shifts and changes for the families. It's all very community-based. And the last thing I'll say about what I think makes it innovative, and then speak directly to the teacher shortage question, is the path is a residency or an apprenticeship model. And so the teachers coming in are learning from the best teachers in those systems. And they're spending 4 full days a week with them the whole year. They're really coming up under them. And then it's designed so that where they learn and are apprenticing is where they will get hired. So you can imagine, and so we see remarkable efficacy ratings. Principals across the state of California, 90% say that our teachers are more effective or much more effective than the other new teachers. And of course, we would hope for that because they've just spent a year with the best teachers in those school systems. And then speaking directly to your point about teacher shortages, one of the most exciting things about the policies in California right now, there's 2 that are really shifting access. And what we noticed, having been in this work long before those policies unfolded and now a few years into it, is there really isn't and doesn't need to be a teacher shortage in the state of California. What there has been, and could be again without these policies, is a shortage of people who can access pathways into the teaching profession. There's a lot of people in our communities who want to be excellent teachers and show up for kids and do the incredibly, impossibly hard work of teaching. I'm very grateful to the state of California for creating these policies.
And I remember several years ago when this was an idea that Heather had, and I'm so happy to see that it's come to life. And so, Heather, kind of sticking to the conversation around preparing teachers and going through this teaching program, we saw the data around kind of, I believe, like decades ago, we didn't necessarily see mental health as being something that was top and center. Like it was always about academic performance and making sure students were at grade level. As we prepare teachers in these programs, what are you seeing to be some insights or new ways of approaching reaching students?
So when I think about the mental health space, and I know there's a lot of people speaking into that today from all sorts of angles, from tech and psychology and all of the ways, a couple of ways I think about the locus of control we have because we're training teachers. One is when you look at the research within a school system, right? Kimi's dealing with the most important people in children's lives, of course, are their families. Within a school system, the most important sort of levers are the teachers. And it makes sense, that's who they're spending most of their time with. So I think about the opportunities to develop teachers who reflect their students, and there's more and more research on how important it is for children to have, children of color and white children to have teachers of color. I think and that shows up in all sorts of things that are obviously related to mental health, expulsion, suspension. So I think diversifying the workforce is an important piece of that. We do a lot of work at Alder thinking about belonging, thinking about and belonging across all sorts of lens. What does it mean for a teacher to belong in our program? What does it mean for a teacher to belong at their school? What does it mean for them to create classrooms where students feel like they belong? So I think a lot of the work around and transformation and race and equity and inclusion and the things that I know are ridiculously controversial at this time, but if we just think about who children are and what we all need, even as adults, so I think we're very deep into that work, and I think those contributions, especially because of how important teachers are, make a big difference.
Thank you. And then Kimmy, with families, I mean, as a parent, we were just talking about like, oh my gosh, how do we have time to do any of this? So you're working with several families to just empower them to support their kids, and then we're also talking policy. Like when you have worked with families, like what do you see to be something top of mind for them, and how are you supporting them through that?
Thanks, Yvette. First of all, I just want to shout out, we have a couple of our FIA parent leaders here and our youth leaders in the house. It is so fun to lead this work alongside of you. I think some of the things that we're seeing, one of our signature ways of building parent leadership capacity, and over the last 5 years, we've trained about 500 Oakland parents and youth. But one of the ways that we do that and engage and tap into that leadership that's already there, but maybe not at the forefront, is through leadership institutes. And we really start with the important kind of healing of claiming your own story and claiming your own education journey. What we find in that process, I would say about 2/3 of the parents we work with didn't have the opportunity to graduate from high school themselves. So imagine the implications, yet they still want the best education possible. They want every door to be open through education for their kids. And so we try to marry those two things, that tension of, I didn't get the greatest education, but I want my kids to have the best. And I think the insight and kind of the takeaway there is, how do we adjoin? How do we make those families partners in that education? How do we bring them into, one, learning how to work with their kids at home, which we see about 100% of the parents who go through our institute practice literacy at home with their kids every week, because they have access. They get to see the data, they get to see the activities, and so forth. So we just believe in kind of fostering that involvement, helping people have that aha moment of seeing themselves as a leader, and then just really unleashing that leadership potential. And we find that parents not only see success getting their own kids to grade level in reading, but then they're like, what's next? Like, how can we take this? How can we do something school-wide? How can we get involved citywide? And so it's a really fun journey to be on, and it's a journey about rethinking who matters in education and who are we investing in.
Amen.
Thank you. And then Orly, when we talk about agency and building this school where students are really owning their agency, coupled with mental health, coupled with like making sure they're academically successful, how have you seen things play out, and how do you focus on making sure making a whole child is happening in a space like this? Because of course it's a new approach. We're used to the traditional model, but yet this is a very new approach. So how do you actually manage all of those pieces?
Yeah, it is a new approach, but we are using research that is a little bit old. I mean, not that old, but we know that for adults, what makes for a satisfying and motivating workplace is a sense of mastery over your work, autonomy to make choices, purposeful work, and relatedness. And the same is absolutely true for teachers in schools. So we try to design the teaching experience to have all those four components. And then we do the same thing with our students. So we want to make sure that the experience that our students are having is one where students are able to feel mastery over academics and really own that piece, that they have close relationships not only with their peers but also with their teachers, that they have times in the day when they can express their autonomy, and that the work that they're doing feels purposeful. And so we've designed both the teacher experience and the student experience for that. And in doing that, we really do find that the school becomes a place that students and teachers want to be and that they feel ownership over. And so while the systems we put in place are new, the theory behind it is something that we know works. So how that looks in practice is we have a mastery or competency-based approach to assessment. We've developed a system we call learning credits that work similarly to Scout merit badges. So we've taken our curriculum and divided it, or we're in the process of doing this, into these learning credits that students sign up to be assessed on and earn. So instead of a teacher saying, be ready for this test on Friday, the students are saying, I think I really know this material, I'm ready to be assessed on it, and they sign up for it. So that's how we're combining the mastery and the autonomy piece. Also, all of our students have a 30-minute one-on-one meeting with their teacher or learning guide, as we call them, each week, where they can talk about whatever's coming up for them, friendship issues, academic struggles, work habit challenges. And in doing that, students have this time set aside for relationship building, which our teachers find really satisfying, but also is what brings students back each day and motivates them to do their best, knowing that there's this person who's really advocating for them and holding them accountable. So those are a couple of the tangible ways that we're living into the mastery, autonomy, purpose, and relatedness pieces.
Great. And Kimmy, when we think about family outreach, I mean, what does success and innovation look like? I mean, I know there's a bunch of leaders out here, so I'm sure they can answer that too. But you've been doing this for a short time, and I imagine there's a long tail to this. So, like, when you think about this continuing on and empowering more families to be involved, like, what does that look like for you?
I think what I would just name is a little bit of the elephant in the room of what we're all talking about is power. And we want to help our educators reclaim power. We want to help our students, reclaim power and feel that sense of ownership. And I think the same is for parents. And so I think we see a world where we're really changing the culture of schools, where parents are really honored and valued partners who are invested in alongside their students. And so I was really just had this super exciting moment with some of our year 2 principals who've been participating in Lit for Literacy and they've had a real vision about parents really becoming champions for literacy in their schools and holding leadership roles around shifting academic practices and outcomes. And I got to watch a principal this year and the family coordinator really training their parent leaders to train other parents how to actually read and understand their children's reading data before they went to family conferences. And we just feel like there's so much potential. What if we thought about our schools where there was 300, 400, 500 parents who could really be partners in the educational success, not just for their own kid, but for the whole school. So I think we just we see these moments, but we really see the hope, right, of what happens when you can really create space for and ignite the leadership of parents and our youth. And I will say, I think a lot of school leaders are really excited about this and don't really know how to do it. And so that's part of the work too, is being in partnership and collaboration around what are the things that you're doing that are getting in the way of those dreams, and how do we do less of that? And how do we put some new things in that place so that you really can genuinely and successfully partner with families? Because schools just aren't set up to do that right now, especially after the pandemic.
And I'd ask, kind of follow up, like, how do we change that narrative, given like a lot of the conversation today is just the data is showing that families are concerned. Like, we're seeing mental health being an issue. We're hearing about policies that are potentially not either, we're not passing policies or we're not moving on anything. Like, how do we keep families, keep in the fight of supporting their families when sometimes like the world around us can be discouraging?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I had this great reflection. I think Ariana was a youth earlier today who said, you guys have to kind of step aside, and you got to step back a little to let others lead. And in her case, it was like a youth, a student, being able to have some space to lead. And I think that's right. We have to work intentionally to create space, and I don't think it's just stepping aside, but I think it's investing in and really laying the groundwork for our parents to really lead. And I just think agency, to me, when you're active, when you are tackling things, when you're solving problems, when you're doing hard work, it's actually very stimulating, and you're much more active than passive, and you really have a sense of your own power and your own efficacy. And to me, those are really good things, when you're struggling, with mental health. And I would say really not the severe extremes where you're having trouble engaging at all, but I do think it's like discovering your power and discovering what you can do is tremendously impactful and could really counter that feeling, I think, of powerlessness.
Yeah. Heather, you and I were talking about today the reaching out to, like, in California specifically and selfishly, the rural area, of bringing teachers into this space and providing more places where educators can look like you, Black, Brown, Latino, whatever gender situation that's going on. Like, what does success look like to you, and how can we continue to attract people to come into the education space where the educators do look like the students?
I want to knit together what Kimi just said with your question. So I think so much of building on what you shared about, there's so much, and was it Hillary? Somebody said, we know what we want. Principals want parents to be engaged. Parents wish principals listen to them. We want safe schools. We want schools that make our children feel seen and like they belong and like they're challenged and I know loved is a tricky word, but I think at the end of the day, we hope our children feel loved at school. We know, and when I say we, I mean parents, principals, teachers, community members, state policymakers. We know what we want, and I think we have these. Jeffrey Canada talked about. The partnerships piece is the other big thing. So one of the big magical pieces of what Alder does, we actually share a quarter of our tuition with the K-12 school systems where we partner so that we are deeply embedded in that K-12 system, and we're understanding that the theory and research that we care deeply about as a grad school of education is critical, and it's as critical as the clinical work and the actual curriculum that's in that, and the pedagogical beliefs and the family values in rural schools and urban schools. And so this work of partnering, and when I think about what Jeffrey Canada said, it's so hard, right? The work is hard all by itself. If all you even did was try to be a great parent or a great teacher or it's just a tremendously difficult a thing to play that one role. And then when you add on, and we think we should partner, that's messy work, it's harder work in some ways, but I really do, I think we've just seen this over and over again at Alder, and I hear it in what you're sharing, the work of partnership is necessary, it's what makes it sustainable. We think about what Hillary said about why children's things don't stay because they don't have voting power. So this place-based, very community-forward partnership work in multiple communities over and over and over again. And I know scale is the magic thing, and I think we could talk a lot about scale and what that looks like in different organizations, but I think what you're scaling really matters, and that the work we think about trying to scale that's really beautiful. Harlem Children's Zone is a perfect example. It's very place-based, it's very local, and so that dialogue and that discourse across community and role. So I hope I'm answering your question of what I think it takes to do this work and sustain this work.
Yeah, and there was something that Hillary said, which was about regional, place-based, like doing the
Yes,
work in
yes,
spaces. And
yes.
I think that's something that the three of you have been like really digging your heels into, is like being in these spaces, serving on the front
That's
lines,
right.
which is very, very
And
powerful.
elevating community members and empowering and giving agency and
That's right.
understanding we're at the table together. We're doing this work together.
Yeah, I want to bring up another topic that's kind of been discussed in these sessions today, which is technology and AI and innovation. Maybe we'll start with you, Orly. Like, where does that? How have you seen that either shift or transform or make some changes within the educational space with students? How are you using it, or how is it being utilized in the school space to support students?
Sure. So last spring, we decided to try something out using ChatGPT. We have elementary age students, so it had to be a teacher facilitated experience. But we tried adding ChatGPT to a writing unit. So the writing teacher and I came up with a whole unit plan to teach students about the history of AI and then figure out how they could use ChatGPT to make their writing better, and if they could. And this was with second, third, and fourth graders, essentially. And we learned so much in the process of putting this unit together and seeing how students responded to it. But one of the things that was interesting early on was that when we first mentioned ChatGPT, there were some students who were immediately like, oh, my dad and I made a poem for my mom on ChatGPT last night. And there were other kids who looked at us like we were speaking a foreign language. The words coming out of our mouths were nothing they had ever heard. And it just became really clear that the new divide between haves and have-nots with AI was going to be exposure and just familiarity and comfort with the technology. And there's been more written about this since. And I really see how this can happen where, and even listening to Sam Altman when he was talking about how ChatGPT has the potential to impact education, his first example was all of the amazing things that students are creating with ChatGPT. So there's a set of students who are going to use it for this very active purpose of being creative and building and analyzing and critical thinking and these higher order skills. And then there's going to be another set of students who are just recipients, who ChatGPT is being done to, who are passive users. And so that's definitely something that I've been thinking a lot about, of how do we, first of all, in our own school, just build a curriculum that's empowering students with the technology, and then eventually, how do we share that more broadly?
And then we have families who I'm sure are all over, like Orly said, along the spectrum of using it, having access to it, and maybe not. So how have you seen this play out in your space, Kimi?
Well, truth be told, I think I personally have been in more of like a fear place around it, and but I've been watching. I have a daughter in college, and she's like, "Yeah, my professor tells me like have ChatGPT review your essay before you turn it in." So I've been like slowly coming out of my ChatGPT shell, but I think there's incredible possibilities. When I think about a parent who doesn't write in English, being able to have ChatGPT draft a letter requesting an IEP assessment or a meeting, or a student maybe who's a recent immigrant who's trying to get a job, having ChatGPT write a cover letter or draft a cover letter. So I think there's incredible ways. I have this, like, one of the project is like, I'd like to actually do a family institute that's around kind of new technology. We've done literacy and college access. So it's just kind of something that's bubbling. Haven't really put it into serious use yet, but I feel like I agree with Sam. It's like, this is here, and it's going to change the world. It is changing the world. So we want our communities to have, again, you can't have agency if you don't have understanding or knowledge or access, right? So I think it's really, it's critical.
And Heather, how about you? I mean, as we prepare teachers to support our students in this digital world.
So as a grad school of ed, with a lot of the work happening in K-12 school systems, we, of course, are grappling with what, you're talking about your daughter, what should the faculty accept? How do we make sure people are actually doing their work? How do you use chat in intelligent ways, both as a student in a graduate school as well as a teacher in the K-12 schools in California? And I'm happy to think more about, here's some funny examples or things that people are coming up with, but it's all very new frontier. When I think about the question more writ large about how should any of us be thinking about AI, I think about the rules for when I was actually thinking about what makes Alder innovative, and then how do we think about what are good innovations. I came up with sort of a list of things that might apply here. So I think one is additive. Was it Billy, the guy from Pinterest, who talked about additive, not addictive, right? Because that was one of the things he was trying to juxtapose. When I think about a lot of innovations, I think additive in the sense of at Alder, we think about, are we adding more teachers who wouldn't come into the field? Are we adding more diverse teachers who wouldn't come? So being additive instead of competing for that limited resource. So I think about this notion of if you're a good innovation, you're additive. I think another aspect of good innovations is broad access. So Orly was speaking directly to this. Who gets access to this new technology? When? How? Is it early enough that they actually aren't just on the other end of it? So broad access at Alder means one thing, but when we think about innovations writ large, who's getting access is a really important, and when, question about is it good? Another one I think is this community-driven, and this notion of how might I don't know, like what would Sam Altman say about thinking about the community responses? I expect he would get an enormous amount of very generative and exciting ideas if he were to really engage different community members across the state of California. And I could go on, but those would be some of the things that come to mind when I think about innovations.
Great.
Maybe just last piece to say on this topic. If you think about all of the technology that has come about over the last 30 years, it's incredible. And overall, the results for kids and the impact on reading scores and math scores does not correspond to the amazing technology that we have. Because at the end of the day, it is about the teachers and the context and how it gets used and all the skills we teach around the technology. That is going to lead to student success. And that's all the hard stuff.
Really interesting.
Something that was brought up by previous sessions was around don't reinvent the wheel. And you all have really been innovative in the way you think about supporting students, whether it's directly with students, with families, or with folks who are supporting our students. And also, we talked about just the importance of actually doing the work in a regional space to see it. But you all have created these amazing organizations, programs, and schools. And so my question to you all is have you all, and I'll start with Orly, have you thought about ways of expanding this, or what does it look like for you to share the wealth of knowledge, experiences, wins, losses, all the crazy headaches, to be able to actually see the work that you're doing and see it in a larger space throughout our country? Would love to hear a little bit of how you've managed or.
Sure. So we are a small independent school in San Francisco, but our teachers, I started off as a Teach for America teacher. A number of our teachers did. People come to our school because they do want to have a broader impact. And our theory is to have a demonstration school here where we can really do things very differently. There's no way if we were a neighborhood public school or even a charter school in San Francisco that we would have the flexibility to do things like group students not by grade level or experiment with assessment in the way that we are. So I feel fortunate that we are in a context where we really don't have limitations on how far we can take innovation in the school space. But if we only were doing it for our small community, that really wouldn't be enough for me or for the educators in our school. But we need to get it right in our small context first and then share more broadly. So we have a lot of ideas for how we'll do that. Right now, we're trying to share as much as we can through our website, our newsletters, by having visitors. We also have currently a partnership with Lindsay Unified School District in the Central Valley, where a number of their teachers in 2 different public school sites are using our work habits curriculum, using our goal setting practices, and implementing our deliberate practice block. So we are, in a small way, able to see how some of our systems play out in a very different context from our own, and we just want to expand that work over time, but this is a life's work, and I'm just at the very beginning.
Great. And Kimmy, you're in Oakland and doing
Yes.
some really powerful work over there. What does expansion look like? How can we get this to like more families across the country?
Whew. Well, I grew up in Oakland, so I'm like Oakland through and through. And I think part of why I'm so committed to figuring out Oakland, as so many people are, shout you out here in the room. Yes. As I went through the Oakland Public Schools, and I actually just stopped going to school in 10th grade, and literally no one called home for 6 months. And I ended up dropping out of school that year, went to work, and realized I would only really be able to work in a restaurant for the rest of my life. And I realized that after 3 years, I didn't want to do that anymore. So I went back to community college, but without the skills of someone who'd been to high school. But I just want to say it's like my dream is like we have got to create an educational system. We've got to rethink and renew what we believe to be adequate and good enough schooling for all of our kids. And I'm in for the long haul in Oakland, so it's just where I'm from. Yes. That said, I was in schools and I helped turn around a school from the lowest performing to California Distinguished School, and I just bless you, thank you for like bringing fresh eyes. I think in general, public education is pretty tired, and we're still teaching in the same ways that we have been for too long, and we still, in general, I think lack the moral kind of courage to say our schools must be better. We must have better outcomes for our Black and brown students and our low-income students in particular. So I'm still fighting that fight because we gotta overcome that, and I really want to see it happen in Oakland. We are really excited. We're actually starting to partner with a lot more Oakland district schools now, so we're really excited to Javi is taking our youth-led college eligibility workshops that really foster student agency, student self-advocacy skills for students who might be in high schools where A through G and college eligibility isn't a given. So teaching school students what to look for, and Ben and Mariela have both led those workshops who are here in the audience. So we're excited about partnering with district schools and kind of meeting folks where they are, but to really, in small ways and large ways, kind of take on some of this ethos around we've got to share power with youth, we've got to share power with families if we're gonna actually get different results for our kids. And so we're really excited. We're in some multi-year partnerships with schools. We're working with the district. We're working about a third of our revenue really comes from our school partners. So we're excited to kind of, we're still such a new organization. We're 5 years in. We're excited to kind of continue learning. We're not done with Oakland. We're going to solve that Oakland first before we move anywhere else. That's right. And who's else out there? So excited for that. And then we do thought partnership. We did replicate our coalition in West Contra Costa and Contra Costa County. So we're excited there's a lot of bubbling up around those parent stakeholders and what is kind of the new reality since COVID-19, when parents, and students got physically shut out of schools, right, on the day-to-day. A lot of like the ways that schools partner with parents kind of dissolved in that period of time. But then parents were like on that Zoom going like, what is actually going on in here? So we got a little curious, right? And so it's been like kind of joyful also to help open up those doors for parents to get back in the schools, but in a new way, where they're leading, and where they're really part of moving not only their own child's, learning, but more kids in the school.
Thanks, Kimmy. And then Heather, you've already started seeing, you've started expanding to more and more areas, but what have you been doing just to like share this model across the country? The idea of like a teacher assistant having the opportunity to be a teacher is so exciting to hear. Like, how can this be a reality across the country? Is there anything that you've been doing to really spread this work that you've done?
Yeah, when I think about scale, I think I'd be surprised if either of you disagree. I think not just about growth in terms of impact, but impact in terms of time. So when I think about scale in terms of numbers, we started our first cohort over 13 years ago. It was 18 people who wanted to be teachers. Teeny tiny pilot. We're up to almost 500 this year, over 500 next year. So big scale. Not only do we see dramatic impact for the teachers who come in and how well prepared they are and what it means for their students, yada, yada. But every one of those teachers at Alder is matched with a mentor, and the impact on mentor teachers is a whole other really exciting piece of our model. They're more likely, people who mentor with Alder are more likely to stay in the field. They indicate they believe their students are learning more, and they see this as some of the best professional development they get. So we have this impact at 500 people a year, 500 mentors a year, so 1,000 people just in 1 year. Huge impact, just in terms of numbers. And then, of course, as you suggested, we started with one school system, and now we work with many, many, many school systems across the state of California. So the scale has, and we're just getting to the number that we said we should grow to for the model to work financially. So we're just getting to scale. What's after getting to scale in California is a whole other question. But I do want to come back to how important I think when I wish more people thought about scale in terms of time. Because we heard people talk about the sustainability. It's one thing to figure out how to do something, but then policy cycles are very short. The funding that's really enabling a lot of these things is very short. Philanthropy cycles can be very short. I think a lot of people in philanthropy are thinking differently about this. But when you think about the kinds of things that really allow beautiful, hard work, partnerships to sustain, time, I think, is a really important other metric that we should think about as we think about the power of impact. Because what happens in the communities where we've been the longest, just like you would imagine, it happens in the communities where parents are trust builds, and trust takes time. And so for something to happen over a 1-year cycle is nothing compared for something to happen over a 5-year cycle, a 10-year cycle. Imagine the kinds of conversations and problems you can solve when you've been doing something for that long together.
Great, thank you. Well, we have a few minutes, and I think the innovative ways you have all approached this work is so exciting and impressive, especially with all the years you've all had in the space. So I want to give just this last question time for you all to toot your own horn. And so I just want to think about something that you're really proud of when you think about your work. What is it that you're really proud of? Because all three of you have done some amazing stuff, and we hope to see it continue to build. Heather, what is it you're really proud of?
It's the people I work with. So on my hardest days where I am I am so done, all I have to do is think about the dean is Dr. Serena Sullivan, the faculty, Yvonne Montes, the director of student services, Ivana Ibaramora, the people I get to work with inside Alder, and then the people who we partner with in these K-12 school systems, these mentor teachers who are showing up teaching is the hardest job on the planet, and these people are showing up and they're giving it everything, and they're coming back year over. It's my team and the people I get to work with.
Amazing. How about you, Kimi?
Well, first I just want to say I've been able to work with mentor teachers and residents from Alder for a long time, and just how phenomenally amazing they are. And when I was a superintendent, it was like we would have principals competing to hire the residents because they were just so kick-ass and just such a one. We just need 10x, of the Alder residents. I really just feel like my whole life's work has been about developing leadership and really preparing others to kind of take the work up. And I couldn't be prouder. And we have 4 of our parent, youth, and youth leaders here today. But it's to me, this is what it's about. Just knowing, there's 500 Oakland parents and youth who really are ready to carry this work forward. These 2 moms here were part of a campaign that they really led with a bunch of Lit for Literacy parents at their school, and they unlocked a $28 million facilities grant that was stuck. And, they really made it happen. And so I just know there is so much impact to happen when we create the conditions for these brilliant Oakland folks to lead. And I'm just going to share one story of another mom from Cox Academy, but she went through Lit for Literacy, and her name is Marlene, and oh yes. And she was so fired up. You know, we show the parents the data, their own kids' data, we teach reading strategies you get at home. She was hosting parents in her own home so that parents could come over and watch how she was tutoring her own kids at home. So it was like super beautiful. Then she got involved with the facilities campaign, which won $28 million after 6 months. And then she said to me, Kimi, I learned I can do anything. She said, I did Lit for Literacy. We got the Cox, and she was like really tearful. And she said, you know, what I learned about myself is I'm a leader and I can do anything. And I believe her. And I'm like, and I'm here for it. And I just think when we continue to unlock parent and youth power and really invest in our people, I feel so hopeful. I know Oakland education can work, and I'm excited for it.
Thank you, Kimi. And why don't we close out with Orly, who's working, when we think about directly working with students, what makes you proud about this work that you've done?
Definitely, it's creating a space that teachers and kids love being in. That's the most important thing, and we see that with our retention rates of both families and teachers. But to give 2 more concrete things I'm proud of. One, we send out a parent survey every winter, and a result that I am really proud of is 95% of families say that their child is challenged just the right amount.
Wow.
Which I think is hard to pull off, and so I feel really good about that. And the second is a story. So we started off really small in COVID and had our very, isolated communities. Nobody got COVID our first year. Our second year, we finally had our first case of COVID in the spring, and a number of our teachers came down with it, including me, and we got to the point where we only had 2 team members left at school, and we were like, should we shut school down? What should we do? And those 2 team members were like, no, we can do it. We're going to run the school, no lunch breaks, no bathroom breaks, nothing. But they did it. And so every day I would check in with them and say, are you okay to do this again tomorrow? Like, should we cancel school tomorrow? Is it going to be okay? And Monday through Thursday, they were okay with it. By Thursday night, they were like, I think we're done. And so Friday, we told families, take the day off. It's like a snow day. Enjoy yourself. We hadn't done the whole Zoom thing because we had launched in COVID with just 12 students, so we were in person. So we said, just enjoy yourself, take the day off. And over that weekend, I received emails from 2 parents, independent from one another, telling me that their child had, on that day off, started the day by making a work plan for themselves and figuring out what they were going to do that day. They put fun things on it, like play at the park, and they put their math work on it, and they checked off what they did, and one did it on a whiteboard, and one did it on a piece of paper, and these are 7-year-olds and 8-year-olds, and that is the point of what we're doing, trying to create self-directed learners who feel empowered to make plans and follow through. And so hearing that from these families on this day when they could have done nothing was really an example of what it's all about.
Sweet. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that. We have come to time, but I want to thank you all. As I mentioned in the beginning, I'm so honored to be here to moderate all the leadership that you've all done to support our students and also folks. I mean, Kimi, you mentioned some folks out in the crowd, but I know there's so many people out there in the crowd that are working on the front lines to serve our kids, to serve our students, to serve our families. So thanks to all of you. Appreciate you all being here and looking forward to a good rest of the day. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Yvette.
Thank you.
Well said.